Good morning, Mr. Sharp. How are you?
Good morning, Julie. I'm well as ever, and the sun's out in Scotland, so it can't be a bad day all round, really, even though it's a Monday.
Excellent, even though it's a Monday indeed. So you're joining us this morning for a 10-minute takeaway, and unusually for you, it will not be on the subject of A, insurance, or B, COVID.
This will be a relief for everyone, Julie.
I'm sure it will.
It will be a huge relief because I won't say the words, read your policy wording.
Really? It surprises me you won't find a way to fit them in. I'm sure if there's a way you'll find it. But we thought we'd take a break from COVID just for a short while and have a chat about Brexit, which has obviously been knocked off the front pages for about the last 8 months. Prior to that, it was all
very much so. Brexit was the thing we talked about before COVID-19.
Yeah. Can you remember those halcyon days? So, yeah, that begs the question, really. Where are we with Brexit generally, John?
Well, because COVID-19 has dominated the papers, rightly so, but a lot has been going on in the background, far more than you think. Ultimately, though, we are still waiting for the final agreement, which I think, as everyone probably predicted, is going to go right down to the wire. We officially leave on the 31st, and I don't suspect we're going to get the actual final agreement until around that time. That said, a lot has been going on in the background, and I think to some extent it's been quite useful for the government because they've been able to do some things which before would have got an awful lot of coverage, but in fact, because of COVID, hasn't got as much. And I wouldn't say it's been sneaked through, that's wrong, but it has gone through, and some legislation is already on the books, which I think would have caused a little bit of controversy, but because of COVID-19, it hasn't. But the short answer is, Jules, we are still waiting.
Okay, so under the radar stuff there. I suppose politics must still be involved.
I'm afraid it is, yes. In particular, with regard to the new president-elect, Joe Biden, he is very keen on Brussels. He's far more keen on it than Donald was. And he, in particular, is very worried about the knock-on effect Brexit will have on, in particular, the Good Friday Agreement. Now, and I have got some, personally, from a personal point of view, I never thought we'd see peace in Ireland. I grew up in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s when there was obviously a great deal of trouble. So the Good Friday Agreement itself can't be underestimated as a game changer. And of course, the US and the UK were intimately involved in that. So he is very worried about it. And he seems to be saying, I will not be doing any really good trade deals with you guys until the relationship between the UK and the EU has at least stabilized and that there is no friction over Northern Ireland. Now he seems to be saying, I want to see that happen first before I'm going to get involved with you in any trade deals. However, there is a thing called the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, which the US used to be a part of, and we, I think, are still a part of. And it's rumored that the US may rejoin that. Now, if they do rejoin that, that will effectively mean a free trade position with the US. But I don't think the US are going to rush to do that until such time as they've seen the relationship between the UK and Brussels settle down. Also, to ensure that the situation with Northern Ireland in particular has not been adversely affected by our decision to leave the EU.
Okay. So what is pretty much certain?
Well, this is where quite a few things have been going on in the background, which, as I said, normally would have been the subject of much comment, but because of COVID, haven't really been the subject of much comment. Northern Ireland, yes, it still remains a real problem. In particular, they're very worried about food supplies to Northern Ireland. We haven't even agreed on that yet with the EU. So we can't, and apparently at the moment, we won't be able to import meat into Northern Ireland. There'll be issues with bread, etc. So there is still, and the question, of course, of the border. So Northern Ireland is still not really been resolved. I think there seems to be willingness on both sides to resolve it, but at the moment, that still remains very much a hot potato, if you pardon the expression. But one thing that is certain is that from July of next year, live animals, animal products, plant products, and wood from the EU will need to enter the GB through what's called a PCP, a border control point. Now, it's envisaged that these border control points will be actually within factories. They won't be like a physical border, but there will be something within factories which is responsible for making sure that the foodstuffs that come in, wood, etc., plants, etc., are all up to our standards. Now, in England, that's going to be run by DEFRA, or the Foods, or the Food Standard Agency. They're going to run these PCPs. And in Scotland, it'll be the Scottish government, and in Wales, it'll be the Welsh government. I'm not quite sure everyone's got this yet. There will be a border of some description. It won't just be like it was before. We will have the ability within these PCBs, I suspect, to reject EU goods, etc. So it's not borderless. We are, though, adopting the standards that are contained in Article 643 of the EU regulations 2017-625. So we'll be using EU regulations to check the foodstuffs. So materially, will it make much difference? I don't know. But there is still going to be some physical control. Also, the PCPs, BCPs, will also be responsible for biosecurity standards. Again, very much following the existing EU regulation, which is in the EU Commercial Regulations 2019, number 1084. So that's going to be a very real change, and that's in. That's not going to move from now. On finance, of course, we still have a very vibrant financial sector, and Rishi Sunak has taken steps to introduce what are called Equivalence Provisions, which basically means that he wants to ensure that there's very little difference between our financial markets and those of Europe. So he's, if you like, matching them up in the hope that this will not interfere too much with the existing trading relationship we have in terms of finance with the EU, and indeed, for that matter, insurance. But there is some move to try and simplify and release some capital requirements. Not release them, but make them simpler and more flexible, so that certain financial institutions here will have a bit more flexibility about their financial reserves. Now, this is causing the EU a little bit of concern, because what they don't want to see, and I don't think anyone wants to see, to be fair, is a race to the bottom in the provision of financial services. What they want to see is more or less the same financial positions in UK as in the EU, but there is some move to try and relax some of the capital requirements for some companies in some financial institutions in the UK. We already have a national security and investment bill that's passed now. That's going to deal with, gives the UK government powers to intervene if they become concerned about takeovers of British businesses which have national security implications. So now the government is going to be able to step in and effectively scrutinise these deals in more detail. And it was likely to reject them if it thinks that any companies pose a threat to national security. And in addition, especially those companies that have any subsidiaries that deal in arms and indeed technology. So that's already in. This is going to also require some amendments to the Enterprise Act of 2020, but that's in. So these deals are now going to be coming under much more scrutiny from the government in relation to the takeover of British businesses, British institutions, etc. We already have, or is going through Parliament, an Immigration and Social Security EU Withdrawal Act of 2020. That will end, effectively, free movement between the UK and the EU. It's gone.
Right.
Okay? I don't see it not getting through Parliament, and it will be in force from the 1st of January. It basically, though it's quite complicated, does allow the UK to choose in what the UK perceives to be its best interests, to choose who comes to work, own businesses, operate businesses, or invest in the UK. So it will be, if you like, a cherry-picking exercise. Now, the precise procedures to how that's going to happen haven't yet come in, but it is important to remember that from 1st of Jan, free movement is not going to exist anymore. If you're already here, there are transitional provisions. Basically, that gives you more or less a right to stay. But going forward, that's now stopped. Now, you would have thought that would have been all over the papers, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Not a dicky bird that I've seen about that one. So there we are. There are other, and far too many to mention in 10 minutes, transitory provisions that have come in to make sure that when we do move from being on our own, that we are ready to do so. But they're far too lengthy to mention. But I don't want, what I want everyone to understand is that this didn't go away. It didn't stop because of COVID-19. We didn't decide, oh, let's have 6 months off discussing it whilst we get rid of it. It's going ahead. And the government is right when it does these adverts to say, is your business ready?
Ready, yeah.
And now I have looked at some of the advice on the government website, and it's good. And I would commend everyone to read it and look at it. It doesn't take very long. But the notion that nothing is really going to change from the 1st of January is wrong. It certainly will. And there will certainly be an impact on your particular business. Now, I've just mentioned some of the ones that have basically cropped up whilst I was having a look about what is realistically bound to happen, as opposed to what might, because obviously there's still some uncertainty. But those changes alone are going to have some impact on businesses. And the businesses need to start thinking about it. I know everybody else has got an awful lot on their minds at the moment, and we're still not out of the COVID-19 situation by any stretch of the imagination. But it really is important that people start having a look at this, because it's not something that you can ignore. You're going to have to do something about it. And just those provisions alone are going to affect many businesses. So the main message is, I can't give you a definitive answer as to how the whole shape is going to look, because it won't be agreed until the last minute. But just on those acts alone, I hope that gives people a flavour as to, so if you haven't done something about it now, at least start doing the research to find out what you might have to do, if not, because it's not going away, it's not been put on hold, it is going ahead.
Yeah.
So,
okay,
there we are.
Sage advice. Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp, as always. Will you do another update for us in January?
Yes, I think we will do another update in January, Julie. I would hope by that stage you've got people far more expert than I to come and join a panel as well. But I don't know. It's sort of, it's been almost, to be fair, the SRA our regulator has been saying, are you ready, guys? Because there will be some impact on legal services as well.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that anyone is really, as yet, looking at this and thinking, and we've got a month.
Yeah.
Well, yes, with Christmas as well, even though it's not Christmas.
It's not long.
It's not long. And when I looked at some of this, I thought, really? Is that in? Is that an act now? Is that going to happen? Well, the answer is, it is.
Yeah.
And, you know, we all need to be ready for this.
Okay.
Anyway, Julie, that was just a very brief overview, but I hope that advice is sensible.
No, that was really useful. Thanks, John. That's great. We look forward to your next update with more news of things we might have missed in light of COVID. We will speak to you soon. Thanks as always, John.
You're
Take
very
care.
welcome, Julie. Thank you.